Okay, so for anyone that's interested in fabrication techniques, I'm going to do this video in a couple different parts because I'm at a point now on these blocks that I'm making for the bottom part of this deck that I've done a couple things here that are pretty basic, fabrication techniques, but maybe you're watching these videos because you're wanting to learn how to do some of this stuff. So I'm just going to try to get into the meat and potatoes at the beginning of this video, and I'll talk more about some of this stuff later on. But this here is some of the blocks that I'm making. So what I've done is I've actually gone and again, I wish I could I need to get some better filming equipment because it'd be great to show you a lot of this stuff as I'm doing it, but for now we're just gonna have to do this way. So I started off, and right off the bat I did something kind of stupid. You can see the seam right there on the side, right? Wasn't paying attention on one of these. I think it's just that one too. So the seam on these, on most of them, is on the bottom here, which will effectively become the top once these are bolted into place. But I cut them to length and drilled my hole, and then I fished a bolt into there and weld the back side of the bolt, which you can tell right there isn't perfectly straight either, but we don't live in a perfect world. So I weld the top of the bolt to the inside and then cap these ends off. And these pieces here are still pretty warm. Yeah, this one's probably the coolest of the bunch. So these pieces here are going to be the center spacers for the bottom part of the deck. I'll drill a hole right here. I've got these flat spots. You can see the profile of the frame there, how on either side of that hump in the middle there's two flat spots, and then on either end there's larger flat spots. So I want to have these points in the middle to connect to keep everything rigid. They're not really going to be for support or everything. It's just more or less to keep things rigid, and that'll get bolted in there. And I'm going to have a piece of flat stock welded to the top of this as well. And when this is all said and done, there's different ways I could be doing this, but I'm not working right now, so I'm actually just working with all scrap metals that I've been collecting over the years to try to keep this as cheap as possible. And I think this is going to be a pretty effective way of doing this. So like I said in the last video, I'm kind of flying by the seat of my pants here, and just really doing things the best way I can with the material I have available. So that's how I'm building the blocks, and we'll make another part here in a minute. Okay, so again with what I'm doing here, this will get welded to this nicely. I put a little bit of a bevel on this side here just because I don't have that rounded edge on the end of this cap, and this weld will fill in very nicely, and we'll have that as our finished product. So here's another trick for putting bolts into a sealed weldment. So we can take a piece of rebar and weld it to the end of your bolt, and then when you put that in there, it acts as its own wrench. Now on the other blocks, I just weld the bolt onto the inside there, and I'm also going to actually put, I'd recommend putting some silicone or something inside that that bit of the hole there. That way you don't get water going in there, freezing, breaking things, corrosion, all that sort of headache. But for this, there was no way for me to get that bolt in there. It was really tough even for me to get the bolt in there, just to fish it around and get through the hole. That's why I had to drill that hole so large with the 5/8 for the 1/2-inch bolt, was just to get it to be able to make that turn and drop down. And seeing, you know, the only way I could do it, you know, I barely even got my, you know, the welder in there. I had about probably 1 inch of wire spun out to even hit the head of the bolt. So that's what I'm doing, and I don't see any problems with that. You know, down the road, is that going to snap off years from now, 10, 20 years from now? Maybe. And there's ways to deal with it. So I think it'll be fine though. Okay, so one more down. We have the larger blocks, all seal weld, got the bolts installed. I don't know if I remembered to say this, but those rebars that I have welded to the top of the bolts, I also weld to the side of these tubes. So that should, you know, that should work pretty well. I don't think we're going to have any problems here. There is a little bit of flex in here, you know. I'm going to anti-seize these bolts really well. Should be fine. So now that these are done, and on these ones here, I took a bit more time, and you know, I got a nice flush weld there. Nice flush weld there. I really beveled these pretty hard, so I got all that weld inside there. These ones are going to get quite a bit of stress and load on them. So now, the main thing I wanted to mention here is I put a little bit of a ramp on the front of this here, because it's going to end up being close to that bar. So this whole deck here is going to be removable. There's going to be a piece of 1x2 square tubing, 1/4-inch wall that I'm going to weld to the top of all these blocks, and that'll be the top of my bottom deck. And I put that little bit of a ramp on there because it is going to end up being pretty close to this bar here. So when you've got this on a hoist and you're lowering it down, even though it isn't touching, you're just going to do yourself some favors by having a little bit of a ramp there. So if you're not quite on the hole, it'll slide back in.